people joining, but that's okay. We will be recording this session, but we will stop the recording at the end so that if anyone has any questions, then that will not be documented. Everyone, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are so excited to have Teresa participating in our Nurses Week as our guest speaker. It's not our last day of Nurses Week. Nurses Week actually ends on Sunday, but it's our last day of scheduled activities. So Teresa, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. Everyone that is participating today will have their name put in a draw for some Nursing Week prizes. So if you could just maybe private chat me at some point with your name and unit, and that way I can put your name into the draw. And I know that Brenda, you have a group participating as a group. So if I could just get those names, then I will include everyone in the draw for some prizes.
How do we private chat?
So at the bottom of your Zoom
says chat.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom, if you click that, and there should be like a blue tab that says participants, and then you just scroll down to my name, Lorraine, and you can, I have two names on the screen, so you can choose either one of those and send me a message and I will include your name in the draw.
Okay,
but Pat, I know who you are, so I'll make sure that your name is there. It's more for the groups that are participating.
Okay. Good deal.
So I will give a quick intro for Teresa. So I first heard Teresa speak at a pediatric oncology conference a few years ago in Toronto. Oh, no, was it in Toronto? Oh gosh, I can't even remember.
Yeah.
Honestly,
look, don't make fun of me because I don't know my geography. Remember?
No, you're right. Toronto.
I don't know.
My mom brain with pandemic brain with my child has a fever of 39 right now. It's just not functioning well. But anyways, a few years ago, and then recently during a 4 North event here at CHEO. And so when we reached out to her to come as a guest speaker, we were thrilled when she accepted. So Teresa was a bedside nurse for over 19 years, most of them working in an oncology.
Are you really reading it? Are you really reading it? Does it matter? No.
But I'm getting to the good part.
Right.
She now teaches for the University of Scranton. She has no allergies. She has a shoe size 10 and she loves the snow.
That's right.
So welcome, Teresa. Thank you for joining us.
You are welcome. I laughed because I always find it awkward if people introduce you and they don't know you. And I was at a conference one day and this woman was like, I have to introduce you. Can you give me some information? And I jokingly said that my shoe size was 10 and I was allergic to bees. And she actually read it. And I was like, okay. And my friend was there, she goes, I didn't think you were allergic to bees. And I wasn't really sure why that came up. I was like, because I was being a smart ass, but she read it. It's all right. Anyway, whatever. It's all good. All right. So I have prepared a little thing for my friends. I'm always happy to do these kind of things. So, and this is very casual. So if something is up and there's something you want to comment on or whatever, feel free. But, it's been quite a year. I laugh that people had said, oh, the World Health Organization is going to make 2021, an extension of the Year of the Nurse. And the nurse is like, everyone's like, no, thanks. We're okay. Like, we don't need another one, but thanks anyway, So, but like I said, it has been quite a year for everyone. But I always think this is funny. We have this hanging up in our Department of Nursing, and I'm always like, oh, I love Gandhi, but really, is this really the best thing, right? You don't ever want to lose yourself, and I think a lot of our colleagues and friends, because of everything that's been going on and all the different roles we've had to do, sort of do feel a little bit lost, right? And are trying to figure out like, how can I get back to me and what I love and enjoy and what I can do in addition to doing, certainly at least my nursing role. So I think too, with everything that is going on, even in our profession, and you can't forget about, but, yes, we're in a pandemic. Yes, we have all those other things, but just even in our day-to-day roles, right? The things that we're exposed to and the witnessing to other people's suffering or the moral distress that we have, it's going to affect us. And in some ways too, when the world is sort of off kilter, it makes this even harder for us. So, just to even take a couple minutes to try to just come back in and take some care of ourselves is important. And, it's preaching to the choir. Everyone knows that we should do it, but it's how can we actually commit to doing it? And I think a lot of times too, when we talk about really being resilient or taking care of ourselves, everyone's like, I know, bubble bath, right? And it's not that. I'm trademarking this, but if I ever wrote a book, it would be called Beyond Bubble Bath, because that's what I think everyone thinks is just self-care. And it's really, not. It's that daily investment in yourself, like you all invest in everyone else. So, making that little time, even if it's something simple, right? I have a friend that said every day she looks to where she can give herself a gift, even if it's a cup of coffee, if it's an extra, couple minutes walking or whatever it is. But she's like, I consciously say like, okay, this is my gift to myself today. And that's something I think that's a great thing to sort of practice. So I want you to think for a second, if I don't know if any of you boat or are into boating or sailing, but if you think about what kind of maybe boat or vessel you would be, and those of you, like I said, who own a boat or are familiar might be familiar with this, and it's called the plimsoll line. So if you look at every boat that is out there, and you'll kind of now start to notice them now that I've made it aware, but they have these lines or these numbers, and every boat is required to have it, and it's called the plimsoll line. What that actually is how much can the boat take before it sinks? So depending on different weather conditions, right? Like, so when they're sitting up in the water, depending on where that water line is on the boat, it's whether the boat is in danger of being unstable and sinking. So it all has to do with the weight that the boat is carrying. So if you were to just spend a minute and think about, if you were a boat right now and you had your plimsoll line, where are you drawing your plimsoll line for yourself, right? I wouldn't draw it up here, but if you think every day of like, all right, here's my plimsoll line. And with all the different things you're doing and all the different responsibilities and different commitments, if you critically look at it, are there things that maybe are making you in danger of sinking? And are there commitments or things that maybe you don't have to do or that you need to let go of, right? My dad always used to say, need to do, nice to do, nuts to do. And the problem is, right, especially as nurses or moms or aunts or wherever our role is, we always feel like, well, if I can do it, I'll do it. And if they're asking me, I should do it because they're asking me, right? So there are things that sometimes, we have to really be able to say, I can't do that right now. Knowing that if someone said that to us, we would be open to that and say, yes, I understand. So you kind of, again, the constant theme is to give yourself the love that you give to everyone else because you're worth it. So when you think about like what's in your boat, right, or whatever, are there things, like I said, that are weighing it down more unnecessarily, right? Is it something that needs to be done? Is it a friend? Is it a relationship, right? There's a great quote that says you can unfriend people in real life as well, right? And you don't have to do it in a mean way, but sometimes you have those people that are, they walk in the room and you're like, oh no, God, right? So, I challenge you sort of to maybe spend some time just thinking about that and thinking about, where is my boat, right? And again, if you think about the picture of it, right? Where are you right now, right? I'm probably not yet on fire, but I'm pretty much like definitely capsized and going on the way down. We're like a week before the end of the semester. So I am definitely not in the red. I have definitely tipped all the way. I'm not completely under, but again, to really sort of do those evaluations every so often and think like, yeah, where really am I, right? And because you can't be expected to do, right, all of the things that you're expected to do with the expectations that you put on yourselves at the level that you put yourselves on all the time. It's really not sustainable, right? So, and again, it has that cycle of, then you're not feeling you're doing your best, then you don't feel you're worthy enough, then you feel like you're an imposter, and then you get more stressed, and right, it's sort of that thing, hopefully, that you learn, that kind of that forced break, right, that we had being inside or whatever. And some people really learn that lesson and they're like, yeah, there actually are things I can do without or that I don't have to do, right? So again, when you're in that sort of constant state, and this is one of the things with resiliency that helps, a lot of times we're in survival mode, right? Especially if you're in an advanced practice role or at the bedside or at leadership, wherever you are, it's always that, okay, how can I make it through this crisis? Whether it's, a budget crisis, a personnel crisis, a patient crisis. And the thing is, we never really spend that time, or if we don't spend that time recovering and just kind of, relaxing and thinking about what we did, we're never going to be in that time where we thrive. Right. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be in a place where I'm constantly always like on survival mode. Right. I want to be that time where I can not coast, but like enjoy all the work that you've done. Right. So that's the other challenge of it, to really build your resiliency. And it's not something that you're just born with. You can absolutely grow it. It just takes some time. So again, I don't know about you, but I think most nurses sort of go in this realm, right? Where you're like, do you want to help? No, yeah, I got it. I'll do it. Right. Don't do it like that. Let me do it. Right. And again, we talk about work-life balance, but there really is no work-life balance. I think that's kind of a myth, right? Because if you're at work, you're not balancing the rest of your life. And when you're in the rest of your life, you're not balancing the right. So it's kind of like, how are you balanced, where you are and getting the things that you need. And again, if I ever had $1 million, and I've said this before, I would absolutely buy tickets so I could get into an airport and not go anywhere, but just spend the time watching people trying to find a place to charge their phone, because it is the greatest thing to watch. Because people will like walk around with the plug and they're like looking for where the plug is, and then they will do these like moves that they can't even, like trying to get over to the thing under a chair by someone's, and it's just so funny, right? Because people are always so worried about their phone and checking it and how much is the battery, and do we ever really do it for ourselves, right? Like, when was the last time you actually really sat down and said, where am I right now with my overall wellness, right? And not just physical and emotional and spiritual, financial wellness, environmental wellness, social wellness, right? So, there's lots of different sort of one-page inventories too that you can do. And I've shared a couple if you've ever heard me do any kind of presentation before, and there's a lot out there. And Helen is one of your gurus there at CHEO. So definitely use her and her resources. But, to think about that every so often and just check in with yourself and say, where am I right now as far as my energy and as far as, do I need to be recharged, right? If you look at this ginger person and you just sort of mentally think about, if you look at where your energy is going out, right? So, and you could copy this, whatever, get a piece of paper if you want, and think about the things in your life that take your energy, and you would put an arrow going out, right? And then things that bring you energy and put an arrow going in. And there might be something that both takes and brings. So that would be an arrow on both sides. But if you think about that and you look at that picture, and then you reflect on, do you have most of your arrows going out, right? How many arrows do you have going in? Now, do you need to change the direction of some of the things that are going out? Or are there some things that you need to bring into yourself so you can get those arrows going in, right? And we all know it's, it's not like I'm saying anything different, right? That if, you can't pour from an empty cup, like they say, right? But it's how do you really fill yourself then, right? And a lot of times people will say, that's all great, right? But, how am I expected to do that with all the different demands that I have, right? So, and again, this is the key. I think I get nervous because I feel like burnout and compassion fatigue are the new it words, right? And people will say, we don't want you to be burned out. Well, okay, great. But then how are you helping that, right? And what does that really mean? So, and sometimes people will say, oh, we're very happy we address burnout in a, orientation. Well, saying don't get burnout isn't really addressing it, right? It has to be an institution, an institution-wide buy-in and a real, connection, right? Not just for burnout, but for really a quality of life. Because when we're happy, right, patients are happy, everyone is just, right, elevated. And I think sometimes that's the struggle, right, is when people that are maybe not at the bedside make those bedside decisions and don't understand, and we don't feel like we have control in our roles. That's when also we start to feel this sort of just overwhelming sense of, frustration and kind of why does it matter, right? So again, part of that and part of that resiliency is having those boundaries. And I think in a place like CHEO, I know Brenna always says how the staff is so connected and really, kind of in sync with each other. And then that's hard because on the flip side, if you have a boundary, it's hard to say to someone that you respect, that's a colleague, that's your friend, that you know what they're going through, to say, I can't do that right now, right? But again, I challenge you that if someone said that to you, if you had someone that you work with that was like, I know you asked me to lead this project, or I know you wanted me to be on this committee, I just don't think I can do it right now. I'm really overwhelmed, right? Your natural instinct would be, to come from sort of that like empathy and compassion and be like, yeah, I get it. Don't feel guilty about it. But then is that the expectations you have for yourself too, right? Are you able to say, I'm okay with saying no to that, right? So again, look, this blew my mind, right? If anyone says, are we half empty, half full? We're actually totally full because there's air in the glass, right? So, and again, always room for wine. I'm not really a drinker, but I always said this past year, I'm like, I wish I was a drinker because man, I would love it. But take a second and read this thing, and see what you think about it. I really think this is a fascinating thing. So truth be told, this was written by a 14-year-old girl that was in during treatment of a chronic illness. I really think it's pretty fabulous. And I think that the interesting thing too is, it's not always to say everything is rainbow and sunshine and blah, 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 right? And people think like, oh, it's such a Pollyanna, but really, right? When you think about, it's funny, I say this to people sometimes, when you go, I have not had the opportunity to visit CHEO, but like sick kids, I came from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. You walk in and it's just brighter, right? Like if you think of a children's hospital versus an adult hospital for the most part, right? There's a smell and whatever, right? But people just walk taller, right? And it's a I don't know, a brighter place. It's not to say that devastation and frustration and things don't happen, but it's that overall attitude that does make a little bit of a difference. So again, depending on how you're reading this, right? Can you start to come from a place where you're reading it from the bottom up from the top, right? As nurses too, we're always taught to assess for something that's wrong, right? That's what we do. We never look at someone and say, wow, this is amazing, because even though you need a lung transplant, your heart's working great. We're always like, oh, here's what's wrong. And I think sometimes that kind of seeps into our general life, right? I've said this before, and it is funny, I'm not quite there yet, but my friend always says when she writes her bills, she views her bills as invoices for blessings that she's received. And she says things like, when I write my heating bill, I'm like, thank you that I have a warm house. Thank you that I have this. And I thought of that a couple months ago, like whatever, I had like a $200 grocery bill and I'm like, ah, and I was like, you know what? Wow. Aren't I lucky that I have $200 to spend on groceries, So again, and it's not to say either, right? Because I know people are like, well, at least nurses have a job and you didn't lose that. And I'm like, it's not that though. It's the fact of like, yes, I'm here. Okay. Bad things are happening. I recognize that. But overall, can I steal those spots in the day where I have that gratitude, right? So again, this is, and I use this all the time, but it is one of my favorite quotes, right? And I'll send the slides, by the way, Lorraine, so people have them if they want them. But, when you think about how you speak to yourself and you really, really listen to how you speak to yourself, right? Is there that self-doubt? Is there that, that imposter syndrome or that constant comparison to everyone else, right? You know, I do love, you know, as much as I joke with Brenna and her perfectly looking bread, right? I always think of like those, you know, nailed it, you know, when you're like, oh my God, it doesn't even look remotely like it, right? But the fact that you try, right? So, you know, and again, I think it's something that we all struggle with, right? You know, even taking like a different role, like where I am, people are like, oh, great, you got this new role. I'm like, no, it's because no one wanted it. I'm like, ooh, hold on. How about you just stop and say like, oh, thanks, right? So, you know, I think we tend to do that. And again, would we do that to our friends? No, right? And really, aren't we the people that we should be looking out for and advocating for the most, right? And again, do you feel like you are worthy of that love? Not only that you owe yourself that, but can you recognize in yourself how unique you are? And really, you know, that you really are doing the best that you can every day. And can you love yourself enough, right? Even if it's half as much as you love your loved ones, you know? And I think too, again, in this sort of like Instagram perfect world or whatever, right? So many times people just show us what they want to see, right? Or what, you know, or what we think other people want them to see. And you can use this exercise too as well. It's called an iceberg exercise. And this has been used, it primarily was used for kids with anger as like an anger strategy, but really you can use this with anything. And when you think about, because sometimes too, for people, it's exhausting if you are trying to present this image that is not either you or this overly perfect image, right? It's just, it's exhausting. So when you think about, you know, what is it that you want people to see? And what if you really, you know, if they really knew you, what would they know? And again, you know, sometimes like certainly I think of Brene Brown when she speaks about vulnerability, right? And it is amazing to me that, you know, I used to tell the nurses that I worked with or that I precepted, you know, they were like, do you ever make a mistake? I'm like, no, I got this job because I'm infallible. I'm like, of course I make mistakes, right? And I tell them because I think we all walk around, like if we had these thought bubbles, right, and everyone could see them, we would realize we're all worried and thinking about the same thing, but we don't share that with each other, you know? And so, you know, we constantly think like, well, this person's doing it better, this person's doing whatever, and that comparison sometimes never stops. So again, you know, is there that point where you're like, yeah, I am overwhelmed, I am nervous, I am, you know, anxious, right? I tell students I get nervous before every presentation, right? This is a low stress presentation for me. Was I nervous? Yep, right? Am I nervous before every class I teach? Yes, right? It's just the way it is. But sometimes letting other people know that you're giving them permission too to just be themselves, right? So again, another challenge for you is, right, you know, to think about, you know, is there something that you want people to really know about you, right? And to also see how far maybe that you've come, right? What has floated to the surface that you've allowed people to see, right? And again, it's not because you're doing it because you're trying to put on a perfect image for yourself, right? But it's, you know, how can I, again, coming back to sort of self-love, love myself enough to be sort of real with people, right? Or at least the people that you definitely feel that safety with, right? And again, you know, you don't have to always be everything to everyone. And I think, again, you know, part of that self-love and that self-compassion is realizing that it is okay to say no. I always say this, and every time like any administrator leadership is like, really, are we saying that? I was like, yep, use your days off, right? If you're sick, be sick. It's okay, right? I think we always are in that, and we're in that profession where like, you know, you start off one thing and they're like, when are you getting your master's? When are you getting your doctorate? When are you getting a certification? When are you getting a specialty? You know, and you're like, right? And I have great respect. I worked with someone for a long time who was a bedside nurse. And the day she walked into our institution, they were like, when are you going to do, precepting, or when are you going to do charge? And she was like, oh, no, thank you. And they were like, oh, what about this committee? And she was like, no, thank you. And she's a fantastic nurse. And our manager at one point pulled her aside and said, you know, you're really doing a lot of damage to your reputation because you keep saying no and people are going to stop asking you. And she was like, that would be great. And she said to her, because what is wrong with coming to work and, doing the best job that I can do and then going home and being a mom? I am committed to this organization, but not to the level that I want to miss a softball game to come in for a committee meeting. And it is just not in my desire to do like an advanced role or anything. And she's still there and she's still fantastic. And she's, she has a great reputation, but it's just interesting when, when your sort of ideas sometimes clash with others, or you think like, oh God, I better do that, because what if they don't ask? Well, that's okay. But again, feeling for yourself, like what I'm doing is enough for me if that's what I'm choosing. But again, it's hard when everyone is running around and you're like, oh God, should I be running around? So again, like I said, I think it's okay to find that sort of piece of yourself and figure out what you want to do. When you talk about establishing boundaries and you talk about taking care of yourself, here's the key for the whole thing. You need to know what your boundaries are. We do a whole class on boundaries at Scranton for our students, talking about how do you establish them. And you establish them by identifying what your core values are, right? And if you think about it, have people told you, like in your education or in your professional careers, you have to have boundaries, right? Or in your relationships, your marriages, your partnerships, whatever, you have to have boundaries. But have you ever been taught how to establish them or how to identify what they are? Because boundaries can be different in a situation. They can be different with a person. They can be different in a different like phase of your life, but we don't think about that. And what happens is we don't realize what a boundary is. Then someone crosses it and we're like, right? And then you're like, oh, I and how are they to know that, right? So those kind of things, you have to spend that time for yourself, just in quiet reflection, thinking, yeah, what are my boundaries? What are my boundaries in work, right? Like, can you call me in the afternoon? Like, am I turning my phone off? Am I communicating to the charge nurse? Like, I'm not working this weekend. Please don't call me with staffing needs, or don't text me with staffing needs, right? Like, where are those boundaries, right? And again, when was the last time you really thought about what are my boundaries in different ways, whatever, physically, socially, spiritually, whatever, right? But again, that will help, right? Identifying them, being able to establish them, and being able to sort of defend them, right? So I think too, a lot of us right now are feeling just obliterated, right? And just sort of shattered, right? For some people that, what's interesting to me is, and it gets me crazy, but, people are like, oh, now we understand what nurses do. I'm like, no, not really, right? Not even a little, but, a lot of people are feeling, just really broken, right? And just not themselves, and just not, so many things have changed, and, so many things will continue to change. And, it was like the rug was ripped out from all of us, right? The interesting thing about you all at CHEO is your lives haven't, like, you've still continued with all of your work, all of your roles, all of the patient care, all of those things, like COVID, pandemic or not. In that sense, your world hasn't changed. But then adding all that stuff on top of it, right? And, there are points where you just feel like, you are just shattered. And I love this image. This is a Japanese practice. It's called Kinsuji. And, the thought of filling a crack with gold, because that's how much they honor those broken pieces, right? And to think about the fact that you're not necessarily broken, right? Because you're still doing your thing. You're still showing up. You're still there. You haven't stopped. But just that maybe you need that time to relax and even think about even the parts of your heart that might be broken. And maybe you sit and think about visually sort of filling them up with gold, right? To make them stronger, but to also make them more beautiful, right? Because it doesn't decrease your value. If anything, it adds to it, right? So again, when you're thinking like, Teresa, you're nuts, because how am I going to have the time to do this? When you switch your thinking to thinking, maybe I'm not a priority, right? Again, it's all self-love. So see how that feels, right? See if that makes a difference. Can you be a priority? Can you give yourself start small. I'll give myself 5 minutes, right? Okay, maybe you can get up to a half an hour, right? And again, think about how you're doing your different things, right? Are you unplugging yourself at the end of the day, right? And just literally trying to be with yourself, right? Or with your family or loved one, whoever. Or are you actually too maybe covering those plugs up so people can't get in and sort of tap into your energy, right? And as corny as that sounds, I have actually done that sometimes if I'm going to have a difficult conversation with someone, or it's been a particularly tense one. And in the end, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done from that. Do I totally stop the emotions and thinking about it? No, but it does sometimes help me realize like, now I'm done with that and I'm going to move on to something else, right? Okay, I have to show you this. So I made reference to this, but I've never showed you the thing, and now is the time. So every time you talk about like your stress in your work and how to build your resiliency, it's all the ABCs, right? Awareness, balance, and connection. So are you aware of what makes you stressed? Are you aware of those things? And how are you finding balance and staying connected? So one of the ways you find balance, right, again, is you are doing things that you enjoy. So Brenna knows this, right? I think Lorraine might know this. I love watching the documentaries of things that I would never do or have no knowledge of. So there are people that raise chickens, and they raise competitive show chickens. And there is, God bless them, an actual documentary about them. And you are going to see the trailer because it's that good.
It's like the Westminster of the chickens.
All the best breeders are here. They all bring their best birds.
They're nitpicking everything. It's the eye color, it's the feather quality, it's the wings, the feet, the toes, it's the whole package.
We have a written description of every feather, what it's exactly supposed to be.
I've studied my standard of perfection time and time and time again.
I've been called obsessive, which, you know, I wouldn't go that far, but
I'm a hatch a hawk. They call me that because I hatch a lot of chicks.
And the male stands right there, flaps his wings and says, "You want a piece of me? You want a piece of me?"
He didn't like her a bit.
What can you do to bump up from third place to first?
Some hold grudges against other birds and never forget how mean another bird was, and others are best friends.
Looks like I'm gonna get fertility out of that one.
He invites them to dinner.
and he puts his wing out and it's something like this. And then the girls just kind of like know to just drop it.
If ever there was a more perfect subject, I never had one. He stood there, it was like Paris Hilton.
This would be pretty serious if I won the whole thing.
I didn't come here to lose.
Look at you. You are a warrior.
I can't, yeah, it's amazing. But anyway, I love it. But that's what I mean, right? Even those just silly things, right? And I just think it's fascinating. I think it is fascinating, right? That people raise competitive show chickens. But anyway, but again, right? It's just finding that balance, right? Like when was the last time you really did something that you really enjoyed and really loved, right? And really too, when was the last time that you had, we talk about gratitude all the time and how, you know, if you write down 3 things you're grateful for, it doesn't have to be anything big. Doesn't have to be a person, right? It could be like, you know, that you have a vacuum cleaner that works, right? But when you do that, it's again, just like when we're assessing, right, for something that's, you know, maybe off, that gratitude, you sort of start to get into that role that then every day you're like, ooh, what am I grateful for today, right? And really, when was the last time, you know, this is someone that wrote a gratitude letter to themselves, right? And really, when you think about that, again, it all comes back, right? It's that theme of just that self-love and self-compassion and that recognition of the things that you've done, right? And how far, you know, you've come and the things, the accomplishments that you've made. And it's not a bragging thing. We are not good at that. We are not good at being able to say like, yeah, I did a good job with that, or gee, I'm proud of myself because of that, right? Just something to think about. And again, if I gave you a list, right, and said things that you love, where would you fall on that? Or would you even think to put yourself on that list, right? So just something to think about. And then again, all kinds of different things, right? We're not talking about anything that has to be, you know, like a big thing or an expensive thing, right? But some of the things, you know, just those little things to just give yourself a little break, right? Or again, to recognize yourself, right? Just to spend a little time with yourself. If you close your eyes for a second and you think about one of the happiest days that you've ever had in your life, right? And you visualize who was there, you know, the colors of the event, you know, were you wearing something special? Were they, you know, did you eat something, you know, particularly yummy, right? Did you smell something good? You know, what were the sounds of that day? And you just spend a minute with that memory at that time and really experience it. And then you open your eyes and you think, that's a memory now that I can draw up anytime I want. And wasn't I lucky, right, that I had something like that, that I had so far the best day of my life, right? So again, if you're stressed, if you're, you know, fine, take a second. The stress is still going to be there. Those things are still going to be there, but it's just to give yourself like sort of a brain break that can go like, okay, let me refocus then, right? But again, you feel sort of that love and that attention and that great time that you had that day, right? And again, you can steal those little moments, right? Anytime, you know, you don't have to meditate in a big way, but again, just to give yourself a break, you know. So, you know, how often do we do it, right? I know my friend had said when she moved to a different location, her commute got shorter and she didn't realize why her and her partner were arguing so much. And she was like, I realized that I love my wife, but because I didn't have that like 25 minutes in the car to decompress, I would get home and I'd be like, rah! You know, and she was like, woo, right? So, you know, those kind of things, right? Taking that little time to break to process what has happened in the day, right? Again, is super helpful, right? So this is one. And you can get this. There's tons of these apps and different things on the phones, right? But you can do this anytime, right? Super easy, right? Do it as many times as you want to do it. Again, just giving yourself sort of a break, right? But something that can be done. And think if any of this sort of has resonated with you and you're thinking about, you know, yep, maybe it is time to sort of think about a change, right? How do you go through your life? Is life something that happens to you, or is life something that you make happen? Right? And, you know, usually, right, it's that internal locus of control, right? That I am responsible for what's happening to me, right? I'm responsible for how I'm thinking and how I'm responding, right? So when you're thinking about that change, what are those things that you want to change, right? Or that you would like to see change, and how can you do that, right? How can you actively do it? And again, when you think about that, right, is it something that you want to start, or maybe something that you're like, you know what, time to stop, time to cut losses on that one, right? And when you're putting that plan in place, right, think of that, you need to have sort of all of these in place, because if something is missing, it's just going to breed, right, the purple column. If you're going to do something you don't feel like you have the skills, right, you're going to be anxious about it, and you're going to be like, I don't know if I can do it then. It's a, you know, it's, I was going to say a border. It's a barrier in my way, right? So think about those things and think about if there's something you really want to do, fine. How do you put all those places, those columns in place, right? So the other thing, and I always have to say this, is it's always good to laugh, right? It is always good. It always helps. And it's just, there's so many funny things out there, right? So in America, we have changed to this new billing code system, and we have gone from like 4,500 to, no joke, like 60,000 different billing codes. And you just have to look at some of these because they're ridiculous. One of my favorites, though, to be honest, I don't know how this happens. Fecal injury. I don't even want to know. but sucked into jet engine. There's actually a follow-up one. It's sucked into jet engine initial encounter and then sucked in. Like, how does it happen twice? I don't know, but I just think this is fantastic. Like, and these are legit. These are actually not BS. These are actually billable codes. I was heard at the library. Okay, right? It's great. But anyway, and again, sometimes, right, don't you just want to slip a little something into the charting that's like, right? This is the person too that's over it. You're dead. All right. I mean, something suggests otherwise, but okay, right? So again, just these things that just, you know, you just are like, okay, whatever you want, right? If this is not nursing humor in a slide, I don't know what is, right? Just too much. But anyway, and then finally too, the aromatherapy. I love it. By Felicia. Smells like I'm over it, right? Anyway, all right. Usually, as I always do, I would like to sort of end with a quick meditation for you all.
Okay, now
Our
we're
friend
going to do
Deepak.
something very interesting. We won't close our eyes, okay? So have what is called soft eyes, which means become aware of the space we're in. Don't focus on me, although you're aware of me on the screen, but actually I'm in your consciousness right now. But just be aware of the space we're in. And now let's start our meditation. So start to observe your breath. Start to observe your breath and don't manipulate it. And notice that even as you observe it, it slows down. Your mind will wander. When you become aware that it wanders, bring it back to your breathing. As it goes in through your nostrils and then out through your nostrils. Okay, now we're going to do something very interesting. You may keep your eyes open, but start to repeat your full name. So I am Deepak Chopra. I am Mary Jo. Repeat it mentally. And now invite all the stresses you have right now, all the things you have to do, your deadlines, all the problems you have. Invite them. Let your awareness fill up with them. Okay, now drop your last name. Just repeat your first name. I am Deepak. Mentally. And this time, invite experiences from your childhood into your awareness. When you were less than 12, your parents, your siblings, your school, your classmates, happy days, not so happy days. And now drop your first name. Just say I am, with no labels attached. I am. Let memories and thoughts fade. Just I am. Now, if you want, you can replace I am with aham or om. Just a sound. No associations. Let's do it for a few seconds. Aham. Aham. Now, even let that go. Sit quietly and just be aware of being aware. This is our ground state, before a thought arises, before a feeling. It's who we really are, a field of infinite potential. Rest in being. Rest in awareness. Rest in existence. Just be. Okay, before we come out, feel all the sensations in your body. I hope you're feeling a little refreshed. You can do this again and do it as often as you want. And you can do it for longer. Thank you.
I love that Lorraine is rocking her little friend there. It's one of the things I think, hi friend. It's one of the things that I love about Zoom is you get to see people too more on a human level, right? And not just like, oh, it's my coworker. You're like, oh no, someone that has a delicious kid. But anyway, I hope, by the way, you all recognize that this is somewhere in Ontario, or at least that's what it said when I Googled it. So anyway, Brenna, you will laugh that I did Google beach in Ontario thinking, I hope there are beaches. Is that landlocked? I don't even know. That's my, yep, I have a doctorate. That's right. Anyway, well, I wanted to thank you, like I said, for having me. And if any of you attended the AFON conference last year, I put this up. You know, when the pandemic started, I put up a sign outside of my house that said, thank you, nurses. And as soon as I put it in the ground, I thought, when is the right time to take this down? And there's really never a right time. So this is not my house, but you know, this sign will be in front of my house as long as I'm in this house. So because, you know, like I said, I can't express sort of the gratitude for my own profession, for my friends, for all of you, for everything that you do. And, you know, silly hair or not, right? You are really seen. And I know that people that you work with, even though you might not always see it, they do see you and they do appreciate everything that you do. So anyway, that's the end of my spiel. But like I said, thanks, Lorraine, for reaching out, and Brenna, I can't wait to get the bread. But
thank you so much, Teresa. Definitely had a few moments